Just introduce ourselves for the record. We hope that there are people listening out there, watching potentially. So I'm Deputy Montfort-Addy, I'm the chair of the panel.
Deputy Karen Wilson, Vice Chair. My apologies for my voice.
My name is Deputy Max Andrews, and I'm also a panel member.
And if we can pass over to you.
Thank you. Deputy Kirsten Morel, Minister for Sustainable Economic Development.
Richard Corrigan, Chief Officer, Department for the Economy.
Heath Harvey, Head of Local Economy.
Thomas Brackenbury, Sector Lead for Aviation and Maritime, Department for the Economy.
Thank you. Thanks again for coming in and for taking our questions. So we're just going to jump in with, I suppose, some fairly open questions to you. So, Minister, we're now entering the the last full year of the political term. What are your key priorities for 2025?
So, as you say, it's the final year of 4, and the Future Economy programme is still the key driver of everything we do and aligning our work. It's also the key piece of alignment for the rest of the government as far as the economy is concerned, and it's the strategy which enables us to work with other departments to try to get the island into a position where productivity is risen to a level that we're able to deliver the healthcare services, etc., that will be needed by 2040 because of the demographic changes. So that underpins everything that we do. Outside of that, we've seen a number of things, capital projects such as Elizabeth Castle and the Opera House, which obviously during the current year, we're going to see that open, and also the Elizabeth Castle refurbishments, I believe, being open as well. We've got key legislation that we're hoping to bring before the end of this year or beginning of next year. That includes the liquor licensing law, changes to the 1974 law there, events legislation, which the panel will be very aware of, and obviously we're still working to get the primary legislation at least ready for debate, probably beginning of next year. Tourism order, and so that's following on from changes made to the tourism order last year, where we deleted some areas around spatial requirements. We're seeking to go further with that and make further changes which kind of make it easier for people to work within the hotel industry, particularly in the guest house industry. And we also should expect to see heritage and antiquities legislation coming through, as well as various other bits of legislation. As far as inward investment is concerned, this is a key area for the island. I really want us to attract inward investment. I'm really pleased that we are seeing applications come from businesses such as high street retailers, which is part of us going out there and seeking businesses, but as well as retail, we're also continuing to seek hotel investment. I think so far it's sites are the difficulty with finding sites, are the difficulties with attracting hotel investment.
Can I stop you there? There's a no, thanks for that. I mean, in terms of the hotel sites, I've had it put to me by somebody that the States is looking to sell or develop Aviemore into housing or part of the Aviemore project. We know that is subject to a proposition by Deputy Alex Curtis. Could that be used for a hotel site? Is any consideration being given to alternatives just than open housing there?
I don't know very much about the Aviemore site. I know it's got beautiful views, so it's a great start from a hotel perspective.
It's already in tourism. Part of it's the old Lagarin site, of course, so that's being used for accommodation.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Haut Lagarin is, but I didn't know part of the Aviemore site was part of the Haut Lagarin site.
Yeah, it's next adjacent.
To my knowledge, it hasn't been considered for a hotel site. I genuinely have no idea how suitable it would be. Beyond having nice views, I don't know. You'd have to.
Do you think there's scope for council ministers to consider a different use for that site?
I'm not in a position to say.
No, fine. So it's a bit out of left field, but it just reminded me
it's
of
a
the
good question.
conversation.
But I'm just, unfortunately, I just know very little about that site except having walked past it in the past.
Yeah.
You know
Okay.
what I mean? Yeah.
Thank you.
Continuing from there, if I may.
Do.
I'm happy to go on. We're continuing to see a medical technology kind of cluster develop in the island. This is, I think, really exciting for the island, and it's happening in different areas of medical technology. And this is part of what I think we need in terms of Jersey becoming more innovative and becoming a kind of centre for innovation in this area. Interestingly, our demographic changes play to that. They are a strength in this area, as well as Jersey being a kind of small 100,000 population as well.
Does that involve, sorry to cut in,
Not at all.
does that involve the use of medical tech, or is it development of tech, or what's?
Well, it's research and development, and potentially use as well within the population. There are different companies operating in different areas, some of them developing kind of botanical pharmaceuticals, you might say, others developing existing pharmaceuticals, but developing kind of more efficient ways of making them.
And this is over and above the cannabis industry, is it?
Yes, this is beyond the cannabis industry, exactly. And so, in fact, I was speaking to some consultants at the hospital recently, and there is this kind of cluster developing. They're very aware of it. Some of the innovators at the hospital, who I think you would all know, are very linked in with that. And we're also now looking at potential for how do we use the island's data? Are we able to pool that data in some way with individual islanders' consent to make that available for kind of scientific research as well? Care is also another area. We've seen the impact funds focus on care technology recently, and I think we're going to see, I think we do need to address the kind of care, not system, but the kind of facilities for care in terms of how many we have, and that can go everywhere from step-down housing all the way through to residential care homes or specialist residential care homes. But I mean, Deputy Wilson would probably know a lot more about this than I do, but I think it's an area where we do need to seek investment.
So in that area, I mean, obviously we're responding to, you've got a big list of work there, which is, I think, encouraging. It's no doubt challenging. Maybe on that last point, to what extent would you get involved in the delivery of care versus what the Minister for Health does, and how closely are you working with him?
I don't get involved in the delivery of care at all, but what I would do is happily put kind of department resources from an inward investment perspective, so looking to attract investment into the industry in Jersey. That's something
tie
I
in
would
with
happily work.
future economy, but also people in the economy who may not be working, in fact, and who need to. Can I ask? I will pass over to colleagues because they might have some points that arise from that initial question and answer. In terms of the future economy, when you talk about the future, you've given us a date of 2040.
Yeah.
First of all, what are the challenges around 2040 that need a change in the way that the economy is currently operating?
So the principal challenge is that by 2040, over a third of the population will be retired, and we'll have seen a 10% fall in the working population at the same time. So what you have there is quite simply, people are retired. They, they are not. Their wages are effectively paid by pensions, etc. As people get older, they tend to have more health needs as well. So we're going to have a large population which has those needs. But underneath that, at the moment, our model is the working population supports that retired population. But the working population is, at current trends, going to shrink. And so you'll have fewer people trying to support more people. And that's a critical problem. It's not just Jersey's problem. France has it, the UK has it. But Jersey's is more significant. You've probably seen a population pyramid which shows that Jersey's population bulge in that retired area goes beyond.
So in terms of how you would seek to respond in terms of changing the economy, what changes are you likely to wish to push forward?
Well, this is where the kind of enabling business part comes in. We do need businesses, or individuals actually, we need people who are working to, and I know this is always a difficult thing to say, but be more productive. And that's economically productive in their work. So that effectively means producing greater output for the same or less input. And
but how does that? What about tax take though? How does that come in? How does the government make sure it's got enough tax revenues?
This is the thing. In order to maintain that retired population, we will need, in many ways, higher tax. Not more taxation, more revenue into government. That's what I'm trying to say. At the moment, with our tax situation where we are, we would need to generate more productivity in the economy in order to create that higher revenue. If you were just to raise taxes, which is an option, you are then going to potentially see people leave because of higher taxation, or you're going to see less economic productivity because of higher taxation. So it's a real balance. It is an option, just don't worry about the economy, just raise taxes. But that will have an impact, and that impact could actually see less tax take to the exchequer.
Can I just ask, Minister, obviously you came into office in 2022 and the Assembly elected you as Minister for Sustainable Development. So do you believe that the island is on the right course if we are to come to the end of this term of office in June 2026, so where we've seen good progress across this 4-year period with yourself in your position as Sustainable Development from a productivity perspective?
I think we have made progress. I'd say it is good progress because we've started to move in the right direction, whereas previously Jersey wasn't moving in the right direction. And we are seeing, so remember as well that I operate in the non-financial services sector. My portfolio is non-financial services, so it's everything else.
Yes.
And we are seeing that change. We saw a kind of 0.4%. I know doesn't sound huge, but a 0.4% increase in GVA from that sector, whereas it was previously 0.2% and before that 0.1%. So we're seeing that increase. But it's a lot of work. When you're an advanced economy, getting further gains is much, much harder than if you're a developing economy. It really is that simple. So we are, I would say, one of the most developed economies in the world. So to try to get further productivity gains out of that is really hard. But the industries I speak to are listening. They are working really hard to adapt. And we're seeing some fantastic productivity increases in some areas. Agriculture is one I often talk about, but we're also seeing that in other areas such as hospitality and things like this. So we are seeing businesses understand that they need to understand the Future Economy Programme and work within it to have a successful island in 15 years' time.
Obviously, the panel has an understanding of your legislative work programme until the end of this term of office. But is there anything that you would like to see be implemented during the next term of office for your remit that you cover?
I think one of the things I think we need to do is, I think inward investment is something where we still need to work hard at. I think it's very easy for us to think that people are aware of Jersey. There's reality is that 99% of the world is not aware of Jersey. And I think this was well seen when officers recently went to kind of events for retailers and they spoke to retailers. They spoke to many of them. And one of the things they got back was, we hadn't thought of Jersey. And from that, kind of 5 retailers turned around and said, we want to know more. And, we'll speak to you and we want to know more. But I think that's really important, is we need to understand that Jersey is not on people's radar. And so from an inward investment perspective, I think that's something we need to push, as well as, and they're linked, the innovation side. Jersey doesn't have a very well-developed innovation ecosystem. And I think that's something we really need to develop strongly. Is there anything?
No, I think the whole world is competing for the same.
Certainly the Western world.
Western world certainly, to improve productivity, to drive up value in the economy. It's a competition for knowledge and for talent because it's a services sector principally that Jersey has. And our export products are financial services and tourism in terms of bringing outside money into the island. It's so important. So that's where we have to be placing our bets going forwards. How we bring new money into the island, either through growth in those 2 sectors in particular, or inward investment into existing sectors where you may have business owners looking to move away, looking to retire, looking to decrease the size of exposure they've got in a particular sector. So ideally you want replacement capital, replacement businesses coming in so that the sector itself remains vibrant. So that's the focus, but lots of other countries are chasing that. It's a really competitive way. People aren't going to necessarily just root out Jersey. We've got to go and shake the tree and make people come here and have a look.
I guess one question I was asking about tax is that ultimately it's easy in a sense if you maybe don't discriminate in terms of the business that you want the economy to grow. But from a tax point of view, if we had the Treasury Minister here, there are certain industries taxed at 20%, certain taxed at 10%, some taxed at 0% in terms of business transactions. And there's always an argument that the staff pay tax anyway. But if the staff are being more productive, but not necessarily getting any more money, then of course the tax base for those companies which are not paying tax here is not being recruited by government. So is there any joined up thinking about targeting what kind of areas are best for government in future to target growth in the economy?
I think there is. I think number one, just because, the implication I understand in your question or the context you put is that businesses may have economic growth in themselves through greater productivity. They may not pass that on to their workers. I think that's unlikely. I think when businesses grow, they do tend to reward their workers because businesses, especially nowadays, there is a real need to keep talented people in a business, so they will reward them. But we also see, another part of what we've been doing for the past year is the increase in the minimum wage to living wage. And that will ripple through the entire system. So we will see higher wages in there. So
That's keeping up with inflation, isn't it, really, the living wage?
Partly, but I think the point being is that we are, government itself is forcing higher wages. So I don't think
I get that,
greater
but
productivity will lead to no growth in wages. I think it's very likely.
But I think from the tax point of view, if tax allowances are going up as well, so the amount you can earn before you pay tax is going up, I think probably in line with cost of living and living wages. So I guess the question I'm asking is how sustainable is the government model in future about providing basic services in 2040 when we've got this low birth rate now coming through, fewer workers, more pensioners?
I think, the whole point of the Future Economy Programme is saying that at the moment, it's not sustainable because we don't have the productivity growth that we need. We don't have the economic growth that we need. And that's what the Future Economy Programme is entirely focused on, is making this, turning Jersey into an economy that is sustainable in that sense.
Good, thank you. We'll come back to that.
Yeah, just to follow on from that, could I just ask, in terms of what you understand about the market that you're operating in at the moment, how is that going to shift over time? And how is that going to bring competitive advantage for Jersey?
When you say the market, because I operate in lots of markets, unlike financial services, if you know what I mean, I have a lot of
generally,
different
I mean, I think Richard was just talking there about, there are two main markets that we sort of drive the productivity improvements in through finance and tourism. But if there are competition elements to those particular markets, what else are you thinking about that would actually bring sustainability to the island? Because I guess that there's something about scale of operation. You might want to attract inward investment, but what's the scale of that inward investment needed to be competitive?
But it is significant, there's no question. And this is, again, why, the offshore wind farm project is very much aimed at creating new revenue for Jersey. That's one of the key reasons behind the offshore wind farm project. I talk about the medical technology cluster that's developing the island. That is very much a high-value, low-footprint sector. So that would be new to is new to the island. It wasn't there a few years ago. It is there now. That's high-value, low-footprint. So that is bringing in, or if it comes to maturity, should bring in significant.
Is that selling to others? Because the medtech industry has two elements to it. You're either an adapter or an adopter of technology, or you're a producer of it. So which are we?
Well, it's not what we are, it's the individual businesses. So the businesses that I've seen coming into the island are creators of new technologies, and that would ultimately be for export. And that's, I think, a very important part of it. By exporting to the world and creating new export industries, such as the medical technology sector, we bring in revenue that would otherwise not have been there. I think it's also really important, I think, kind of going back to Deputy Andrew's perspective on what would need to be done in the 4 years hence, is I think we do need to realign our relationship with Europe. I think it is really important. That's a whole trading sector which there are large barriers to at the moment, and that becomes very difficult. And, those barriers have been placed there by the UK's decisions, not by Jersey's decisions. And I think will be important for us in the future to kind of grab hold of our own relationship with Europe and not leave it to the UK to define our relationship with Europe. I think that's going to be something that's really important. I'm talking particularly in the trade area.
I was just going to ask actually what you thought might be the kind of external partnerships or arrangements that you might want to develop or explore to actually address that particular point.
Yeah, I think I mentioned financial services and tourism as being export sectors. I think you go to any jurisdiction or location of our size, you'll find one or two areas of specialism. You'll find a dominant employer or employment sector in those areas. Go up and down the UK, go across the continent, you'll generally find that. So your ability to support depth of expertise in any more than a couple of sectors from the size of population base that we have is really challenging. So focusing on the export sectors that brings new money into the island, so we've got two very established sectors there, and government is investing significantly in both of those. The investment that's going behind the tourism sector, extra money going into Visit Jersey, extra money going into route development, That's really important to make sure that we are accessible, because you've got to get the marketing, and then you've got to get people activated to want to come and find it easy to come, and then have a good experience while they're here. I think the partnership that's formed all the way through now between government at the front end supporting Visit Jersey with the marketing, then having the route development effort, and then all the work through the JHA in terms of developing the right experience for islanders when they're here is critical, and should help to foster that next stage of growth. Financial services is competing on a global stage in a very competitive market. We're seeing some of their competitor jurisdictions finding it harder to breathe in the thinner air of international standards, and therefore there is a flight to quality that benefits that sector. If we can find a third one, as the Minister says, whether it's medtech or something else, that is another export sector that's bringing new cash into the island. Then some of the other sectors then benefit from the consumption that islanders then have, whether that's retail or other parts of hospitality, benefit from the consumption of those that are living here and earning here. But I think to the Chair's point earlier about taxation, I think what islanders would be looking for, first of all, is that government cuts its cloth, spends as frugally as it can, places its bets very sensibly. Second, I think that, in terms of fiscal receipts, they'd want to see us grow the economy to create more fiscal receipts to spend on priorities. And third, and I think third by some margin, is actually putting up headline tax rates. So you've got to have exhausted those first 2 points pretty comprehensively before you get anywhere near that third one, I believe.
I think it's really important as well, and the Future Economy Programme speaks to this, is Jersey has to be international in its outlook. I think Jersey needs to buck the protectionist trend. We see this kind of autarkic trend going on around the world, particularly driven by the US, but other areas as well. And Jersey needs to buck that trend. For us to become protectionist in a way, I think would be very, very dangerous for the island economy. So we need to remain internationally focused. We need to make sure we have a strong skills base. And again, that's about, we educate islanders, but we know lots of islanders leave. So there is that part of, we want them to at least come back or remain here. So having a range of careers, and this is where the arts and culture sector really comes in, things like this, is by enabling them to have a range of careers, they can see they can come back. I've said it here before, if you don't want to work in finance, then it can be difficult in Jersey to find careers for yourself. Again, arts and culture breeds creativity. Creativity creates problem-solving people, and people who can solve problems are going to be fantastic for the island in any sector. So it isn't for me as Economic Development Minister or my successors to specifically choose industries and say, this is what we're doing. The medtech sector was partly driven by itself. And you see, people are looking at Jersey and they've themselves come to the conclusion this would be a place for them to work. Then you think, right, that's happening, so Jersey has something to offer. We need to help support that and help it grow. I'm not someone who believes there is either a single silver bullet. I think too often reporting around the economy is that, let's have this industry and everything will be fine. That's not how economies work. They're all knitted together. And, it is the creativity of people within and without the island that will bring the next successful sectors to the island.
I think the question was more about what kind of wider infrastructure are you creating to be able to incentivise, new startups to actually bring that kind of creativity that you've talked to the island. And particularly because it's close to my heart, the medtech sector I know needs a hell of a lot of infrastructure support around this. It's not just about having one individual with a bright idea. So it was really the challenge.
No, that's
that.
right.
Impact Jersey.
It's partly Impact Jersey,
Yeah.
but it's also regulatory change, bringing in the regulatory infrastructure they need. I think it's absolutely right that we have a health infrastructure which attracts people to be here because they get better healthcare here than they would somewhere else. An educational infrastructure that is attractive to people here as well as, particularly St Helier, the town, that is attractive in itself with a fantastic kind of hospitality infrastructure, a superb physical infrastructure in terms of an attractive town. All these bits of infrastructure need to be there and need to be improved upon. I have been very clear in the past that Jersey over the last 30 years, in my view, has not sufficiently invested in its wider infrastructure. And that has led to us now needing to invest significantly in infrastructure.
So can I just jump in? It's related.
We do need to invest in infrastructure in all sorts of areas.
Yeah.
I think just because the way that the hearing's developing, I think if I can move some questions
Of
around.
course, go as
We've got some questions on the subject of Labour, basically, not the political party, but workers, in other words.
Yes.
So I think this is where this is segueing into. So the visitor economy strategy, for example, if we use that as an example, but there are other industries which I think this is equally applicable to. What actions are being undertaken to support employing, to attracting staff to the island where necessary?
So this is something that sits principally with the Chief Minister through Housing and Work Advisory.
And it's topical, of course, because the Housing Minister was on the telly last night, I think.
I didn't see that.
No, the Chief Minister, sorry. He said this something remarkable. He basically said that people who work here should be given the right to rent properties, which I think anyone who's not from Jersey, that would sound a bit remarkable. So they're allowed to have the opportunity to rent properties. So in terms,
I believe we're bringing those changes forward, and I'm supportive.
I just think it's strange because presumably they have to rent. If you're living here, you have to rent somewhere to live.
I don't want to waste your time or my time, but I can explain the situation where we are, which I agree is odd, and it's something I've spoken in the States about in the last Assembly, that we invite people to come here and then make it very, very difficult for them to find accommodation, and that's inappropriate at a human level. But that's changing, and I'm really pleased for that.
I guess the question is, like, what changes do you think are you going to be part of to make it easier to come and maybe potentially work in Jersey? Because we're not, the birth rates have gone down, so older people are getting older and retiring, of course. So do we need to make it easier for people to come and live and work here?
I think we do. I think we have moved. I think we have moved from a situation where we, almost want no immigration. So I'm going back 20 years. It was very much anti-immigration in Jersey. The island's too full, was what people were saying. Unfortunately, for those people who believe that, I cannot see how Jersey could achieve the necessary economic growth to support that ageing population without more people coming to the island. We will use technology and we will use existing businesses to become much more productive. That mitigates and reduces the amount of new people needed in the island. But it's really hard for us, I think, to say we can support people in their retirement in 10 or 15 years' time without more people coming here. And
do you think we could target, could we have a policy as Jersey to say we would like to welcome people under the age of 30 to come and live and work in Jersey? And in fact, you won't need to wait 10 years to be able to buy or rent a property. You can do it from day one.
I think buying a property I've still got an issue with, as in, I think because housing is in short supply in terms of actual for purchase, I think it's appropriate to potentially have restrictions around that. But on the renting side, I agree, we shouldn't have those restrictions. If you come here, you should be able to rent in a free market.
But what if you're somebody who wants to come to a place and buy your own house because you believe in that, good conservative theory that you want to be a homeowner and you want to invest in the island from day one? Why would you have to wait 10 years to do it?
Well, I think, as I just said, housing can be in short supply, properties are in short supply, and if you suddenly had lots of people coming into the island and buying property, you will then be pushing property prices up much higher. One of the reasons we have purchase restrictions is to try to enable those people, those young people who do grow up in Jersey and stay in Jersey, to enable them to not be priced out of the market. And we've already seen over the last few years how young people are being priced out of the market, and that's with the restrictions we currently have on purchasing. If we were to open our doors and let people buy, you would, I believe, see significant increase in house prices, and young people would be very much priced out of the market. In renting, I don't think it's the same. Quickly to the point about what we're changing, on the 21E, the high value residence element, we've made very clear changes where we are seeking kind of younger, more entrepreneurial and economically active high-value residents who will be coming here to actually set up businesses.
But they're not the workers. They're not going to work in.
I'm getting there. Believe me, I'm getting there. You've mentioned Deputy Al's changes via the Housing and Work Advisory Group to the renting, which I think is a really important change. And on top of that, we are continuing to work with the Justice and Home Affairs Department to find the right balance in terms of immigration restrictions. Now, obviously, we are limited by the UK's element of immigration restrictions, but on the work permit side, I think we need further relaxation. We do, in some sectors, the kind of time-limited element, either 1 year, possibly up to 3 years, does cause problems, and it does cause, you spend 3 years training somebody up, They become a good part of the team, and then you have to let them go. I don't personally think that really works for us, but we need to work more with Justice and Home Affairs to make that happen. I also appreciate Justice and Home Affairs operate under the kind of wider umbrella of the UK's own laws.
You talked about educational infrastructure as well. So do you think that there's a possibility that developing an educational offer in Jersey, possibly at university level, could benefit the wider economy?
I believe that that's where the innovation part comes in. I believe that we should develop what we have and evolve it towards potentially, ultimately, one day being university level. But I think I am not a fan of saying, right, let's set up a University of Jersey. I think we have institutions here, whether it's like JICAS, for instance. We've got the Impact Fund, which can fund innovation. We obviously have good educational institutions as well, such as Highlands. I think it's better to work with them, evolve them into something.
But is the idea to bring in students to potentially from abroad
that could be part of
to invest here, both in terms of they spend, but they also provide labour?
That could be part of that. But I think it needs, the reason I'm not a fan of let's set up a University of Jersey, build a campus, don't know where you'd build a campus, number one. But two, okay, you need...
Abbeymoor is probably one potential.
For argument's sake, you need 3,000 or 4,000 undergraduate students to make that pay. Where do 3,000 or 4,000 undergraduate students suddenly live in Jersey? We don't have the place to put them. We already, today we've got the hospital going through in... potentially going through being passed for planning. That's going to require a very large workforce. As I've just talked about, other infrastructure in the island that needs to be built or improved, that's going to require a very large workforce. If you were then to say, I'll take the lower end, 3,000 students kind of come to Jersey, I don't see where you put them. And this is one of the reasons why, in the past, I've raised issues like a fixed link to Europe, because there comes that element of you either try to house everyone here in Jersey, in which case it will significantly change the island, or you find other ways of enabling people to move more freely to and from the island.
Thanks for that. We're going to move on to a different area. We may come back to the future economy if necessary. We're going to move on to the Opera House, if that's okay. Just the next things, 13. Thank you, Matt. You say 13?
Page 13.
Page 13, yeah, sorry. I was already on it. There you go. So, again, I'll start off on this and then... so we got a response to a letter on the 18th of October regarding... no, this is Bergerac. I'm not going to do Bergerac here.
I saw the first episode last night. It looks excellent.
Is it good?
Yeah.
I think I can probably do this without the question sheet anyway.
Yeah.
Cheers. Thank you. So the issue of the Opera House came up, I think, on the 21st of January in the States, and there were some questions put to yourself.
I'll accept the date from you. I don't remember the date.
It was the first one of the year anyway. And first of all, the things we've been to see the Opera House. I think we've all been to see it. It's impressive inside the way they've done it. There's lots of good work. So I think congratulations are due on that to all involved. And I know it was a joint project, of course, between yourselves and Property Holdings and the contractor. I've got to raise the issue about the technical upgrade because this was raised in the States, and effectively the response initially from the Minister for Infrastructure and Property Holdings was that they're responsible for the fabric of the building rather than the internal running of the building. And we've got this issue about the spec, which we were made aware of about 18 months ago at least, saying that when the Opera House finally opened, they wouldn't be able to put on certain shows, and sure enough, that's what's happened. We've also had the Chief Minister during question time on that day, Questions Without Notice, said that it's been identified that improvements can be made to technology, and I'm absolutely sure, having spoken to the Minister, so yourself, Minister, that the government will assist where possible. So what is the plan for the tech and the spec in the Opera House?
Well, and I believe I can't remember if I said this in the States or not. We had, at that time, not received any other information than one quote from one supplier about
what
technology.
date are we talking about here?
So if we go back to January 21st, certainly at that point, we had only had one quote, please correct me if I'm wrong, one quote from one supplier via the Opera House that we were seeing. We had asked many months before for more than one quote. You know, that quote was talking about millions of pounds. You cannot, in government, spend millions of pounds on one quote from one supplier. We never received alternative options. I asked personally about an independent audit of the technology, and I asked personally about looking at other technologies that may be available, such as wireless technologies. We were rebuffed on all fronts by the Opera House about exploring these. Again, please correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. I don't want to say anything wrong. It is not possible to deploy millions of pounds in technology or on anything else from public funding without having a much better understanding of what is required. And I am very pleased to say that we have. We as a department appointed an independent auditor who went and looked at existing technology, and they have looked at the equipment and said that this equipment is in the main usable. They have looked at the cabling and said this is in the main usable. I don't know if you'd want to pick up on that.
Well, not quite yet. I mean, the point is that this isn't just something that was flagged up on the 21st of January or at the end of last year. This could have been and should have been resolved right from the beginning when funding was being allocated. And I think you were told back at the time that they would need a certain spec to meet modern standards. And
I don't believe that's correct.
Well, that's not.
That's categorically not correct. The Opera House board and the acting theatre manager at the time were involved in the speccing of the renovation works, and this was not in the original specification for the works to be done to renovate the Opera House, which themselves rose considerably from a sort of minor refurb costing several million to where we ended up spending, a much more significant
over £12 million. Yeah. It started at a £2.7 million project and ended up at £12.7 million.
We know it wasn't in the original, but we're getting into circular argument.
What I'm saying is the Opera House board, Jersey Opera House Limited, which at the time was, the company operating the Opera House, and maybe in the future the company operating the Opera House, agreed that specification.
Did they at any point raise the issue of the technical upgrade at all?
To my knowledge, at that stage, no.
So we formed a project board in about September, October 2022. The Opera House were part of that project board. That project board met every 2 weeks until the end of 2024. So we had 48 or 50 odd meetings. A single meeting was not missed, and the Opera House were at all of those meetings. For all of the last quarter of 22 and 2023, we were looking at the scope of the project and the value engineering and the affordability so that we could complete the three elements, as my chief officer has said. So it was the health and safety improvements of the building, it was the accessibility of the building, wind and water tightness, and the operational carbon footprint. None of those things involve technical equipment or cabling. Right, so if that was important to the Opera House, they did have their opportunity all the way through the last quarter of 22 and all of 23 to raise that. Contractors didn't come to site until 24.
Do you think that you might have been able to raise the questions with them as to what was needed in terms of the upgrade to deliver a fit-for-purpose Opera House facility?
We do have a fit-for-purpose Opera House. I think that's the misnomer and the misinformation that's going around. The Opera House is able to open and is fit for purpose.
I think the issue we had is that we had members of the public over a year, probably 18 months ago, telling us that they knew when the Opera House opened, the tech spec wasn't going to be right. We put it to two of your officers, so it was Chris Kelleher and Paul Milbank, probably about a year ago. I don't know the exact date. And we said, this issue's been flagged with us. Are you aware of it? And I think the answer was globally, yes, it would be nice to have, but we don't have the money to do that.
So, Chair,
so it was raised as an issue. And now, and it's frustrating when we get to the point that the Opera House have been telling us they can't put on certain performances and they're going to have to refuse them because they don't have the right spec. And this was raised about 18 months ago.
Can I just say, the Opera House is always going to have to refuse some performances. We have a mid-range Opera House in a small community in Jersey. We cannot and will not be able to put on every show on earth.
But they're refusing it. They're refusing it to a tech spec because of a tech spec, which the Chief Minister says, and I go back to this point, the Chief Minister says that he wants the improvements. They've identified the improvements that can be made to technology, and that I'm absolutely sure, speaking to the Minister, that government will assist where possible. So the Chief Minister accepts that actually there is a better technology out there. do you not accept the fact that if the word gets out that Jersey can't host certain productions and performances, companies are going to simply say, don't go to Jersey because their new opera house is not geared for these types of performances?
Well, obviously, if it can't do a type of performance, then the company is not going to come here to do a performance it cannot do. That's obvious, okay? I am sorry. We have delivered everything that was in that spec. We have delivered it on time and on budget. And I think really importantly, during that period of time, the Opera House has done very, very little, tantamount to nothing, in terms of providing us with the information that we need to change nation. They at that time did not ask for any of this to be in there. The project then gets underway. It's incredibly difficult to stop a project.
Well,
at that
we
time.
certainly asked for it
And
to
so
be.
I am very sorry, but I am not here to answer for other people's failure to do the work that they needed to do.
Do you accept that if the technology is out there, the Chief Minister's given an indication that he would like this issue to be resolved, and that you've suggested that actually if several quotes are put forward, you could look at how the new technology is adopted? Is that something that
I have asked
takes?
them to look at various different technologies. They didn't do it. I went off myself and looked at technologies that were available that they said would not be appropriate or were not available. And I was able to get people to tell me from theatre supply companies around the world that this technology is available and would be used.
So, Minister, where do we go from here then with this?
We are working with the Opera House at the moment to get it open as soon as possible. I work with the current incumbents in terms of Jersey Opera House Limited to make sure that they are fit for purpose and able to deliver a programme in the future via the Opera House. And when I'm satisfied they are fit for purpose, then they will be able to continue and deliver a programme for the Opera House. At the moment, I need to be satisfied with that. They are fit for purpose.
Specifically on the issue of tech, what's the answer to that? Is there a better tech spec?
There is always a better tech, always a better tech.
I think the
We
available...
could fit tech today, tomorrow there will be better tech.
It just doesn't ring very... There's a dissonance here with
The
wanting
dissonance isn't on my part, I can
There's a
tell you that.
dissonance with wanting inward investment into Jersey and something that's fit for purpose and investing in infrastructure, when the Opera House is saying we can't put on certain shows because the
What
tech
do you
is
mean
not
by
there.
certain shows?
That's what we've been told. There's
What
certain
certain
types of
shows are they
performances.
talking about?
I think you can ask them about that.
How
Hopefully
about
you'll
you
have a
don't know
conversation.
what certain shows they're talking
I'm
about?
not an expert.
And so they haven't
yeah.
told me what certain shows they're
I'm not an
talking
expert
about.
in the... I take what they
I'm
say
not
at
an
face
expert in
value.
opera houses either.
So if I'm told by a particular expert in a business area that they can't do certain types of business, I take that at face value.
And they didn't tell us this at the time of signing off the specification.
We sent this to
There
your
are two-
officers
there are
over
two-
a year ago.
There's
Heath
a
is
couple of
far
things
more
I'd like
close
to
to
add.
this
So
than I am.
I was senior responsible officer for delivering this capital project. It's nearly £13 million, and let's be honest, the government doesn't always deliver capital programmes on budget or in time. We did both of those things on this occasion. We did that by adhering to discipline and having that board and having those board meetings and having those meetings minuted every 2 weeks. So the level of communication was at the absolute highest level it could be. And it wasn't like the Opera House weren't in the room. They had the same seat around the table as the government did. So they were part of that board week in, week out. There were things that they brought to the table during the course of the project that were capital items that weren't in the specification that we considered. And as a board, we agreed and put those into the project. Now, if we were being belligerent, we'd say, no, they weren't part of the scope. They're not going to happen. But we considered them in the round. And if they made for a better opera house or an opera house that could operate and be more functional, then we looked at them in the round and we approved them. And they were outside of the specification. Now, when it came to the technical equipment, there are two elements to that. There's the cabling in the building, and there are the bits of equipment that plug onto the end of that cabling, okay? Those things were brought to our attention at a point where we said, right, fine, if these need to be considered like the other items, then we will pause and we'll consider them. Bring the information to the board. The information which came to the board, just around one of those things, the cabling, started at £60,000. It went to 120. It went to 600,000. It went to 1.2 million. And you know, you can't pause the project forever, because the next question is, why are you late delivering this project? Or why are you over budget with this project? So they did bring the information to us, but it was never a stabilised amount of information that we could consider in the round. It was a single supplier, as the Minister said, and it was a price that was never, you know, give or take 5 or 10%. It was a price that was doubling every few weeks, and we had a project to get on with, and we had a contract with a contractor who was live on site. So as it was, it took a huge amount of courage to say to the contractor, could you pause, take your men off site for 2 weeks whilst we work with the Opera House to try and get this price stabilised. When they got that price stabilised with the equipment that plugs onto the end of the cables, we're talking of a figure of over £2.5 million. Now, it was the job of the Opera House to identify this thing. They're the people who for 20 plus years have run this venue. They should have known what the condition of that equipment was and built it into the spec, and they had every opportunity to communicate that through the course of sitting down with us every 2 weeks for 2 and a bit years.
So the point...
I am unimpressed, I have to say, by the way the Opera House Limited, which has been funded, its wages have been funded since COVID. I am unimpressed by the way they have engaged on this particular matter.
Is there any reason you didn't put the Opera House board out to tender? I mean, you've got a board that, you know, you're getting a new Opera House. Could you not just have asked for expressions of interest for somebody to run the Opera House?
We could have,
But
we were working with the people who were already there. They had run it for 20 years, and it seemed like we would carry on working with them. We've done that, but I am at that point where I need to make some decisions about which company will continue to operate the Opera House.
In the interim, what will you be doing with the company to actually make sure that some of their aspirations and ambitions, because I think what's at the bottom of this is they wanted to match your ambition for the Opera House in terms of, you know, providing the kit and the equipment to deliver a really good experience for people. So how are you going to manage that relationship between now and you know, over the next couple of months, given the scenario that we've just talked about?
Well, I think it's really important. I think there is sometimes a desire, particularly in the political realm, to say that everything should be gold-plated and everything should be perfect at day one. I have a different approach to things. I believe Jersey needs to be enterprising, and that means you work with what you have today and you work in a way which helps you build to a greater future. That is what the Opera House need to do. They need to work with what they have today, and they need to have a business plan. And believe me, they have not supplied me with a business plan, which is meant to be delivered in October, but we got last week, I believe.
This week.
They had not supplied me with a decent business plan to show how they were going to do things. Rather, they preferred to run to the media and say, oh, we haven't got what we wanted.
And can
And I say, no, work
include
with what you've got
some of
and
this?
build it to a better future. That's how you deliver things. That's how we have to deliver everything in Jersey. It's not like the end of this. Sorry, Deputy, if I could just quickly say.
I just want to be clear. So what you're saying is that in the business plan that you are expecting them to be clear about what they need in terms of technological support
They have
to continue.
technology.
Is to say this is what we can deliver. You know, the day for, you know, we can't deliver unless X, Y, Z. Focus on what we can deliver. You know, we can't host a football cup final in a 30,000-seater stadium because we don't have one. We don't have a 10,000-seat indoor arena. There's lots of things we don't have that if you had a wish list and unlimited money, you would look to do to try and attract people into Jersey. This latest bout of technology that the Opera House Board are seeking is exactly that. It's a wish list. Okay. So they have to get open and focus on what they can deliver, and government is committed to work with them over the medium term to see if there's ways either to find money in the government budgets in future years or to help raise money philanthropically, because it's unforgivable that the Opera House Board starts a campaign to fund these improvements literally the day the keys are handed over of the completed building, but they should already have a programme ready to go.
So can I just
started years ago?
Can I just interject? So I referred to, we had a meeting on the in March last year, and it was with the two officers that I mentioned from your department, and the file you've got says the panel asked if it was worth spending an extra to accommodate all types of show and ensuring that the staging is fit for purpose. The SPM, so I think that's the project manager, advised that this aspect informed part of the original specification and condition survey in 2019, which included health and safety, disabled access. And so he's told us that should have been included in 29 implication. The spec that would have allowed the Opera House to accommodate all types of shows.
What do they mean by all types of? It cannot. It will never be able to accommodate all types
there are
of
shows.
So what do they mean by all types of shows?
So if this 2.5 million was spent on the technology that was up to date that they needed, they would be able to host a variety of performances that they can't currently do.
And this is in March 2024.
This was last year that we had that meeting. So
This was mid-project.
Yeah, this is around the time where we stopped the project to enable the Opera House to bring forward a specification on the equipment and a solution to the funding of it.
Yeah.
You know, so
that was in March. Like, I guess what I'm getting
there is
down
an
to-
onus on the Opera
I don't
House.
take any pleasure at this, but we've got a brand new Opera House.
I don't take any
which
pleasure
is,
in it either, because I'm answering for other people's failures.
Yeah, and you're the minister.
No,
And
this is the Jersey Opera House's failures.
What we need to get to the bottom of is that this could have been resolved between March and now, before the Opera House opened, or should be opening, so that they could have the spec that they need and we decide who's going to pay for it. That's what it boils down to. Either they fund it themselves, it comes out of their grant, or government contribute, or there's match funding. Those are the options. And it seems like they will have this spec at some point, because that's what they want. They've either got to raise the money themselves to do it, or government will pay for it. So what's the solution?
So the officers who've made that comment are not the operators of the building, and they never have been. There's only one party around the table that have ever operated the building, and that's the Opera House. So if they can bring forward a price to a board and a specification that can be considered, then it would have been considered, but that never happened. Okay, so that's...
It's really important you understand
It's as straightforward
the
as
Opera
that.
House have not delivered the information we needed at the right time for us to make those decisions in the favour that they wished. The Opera House has not done that. And this is why I keep saying about I am answering for other people's failures, because they failed to provide the proper specifications, alternative opinions on what those specifications were, looking at alternative technologies. They failed to do that. In fact, they didn't just fail, they refused to do that. Okay, I cannot sign off on one estimate from one company, and that's it. That's
what I'm
just
trying to get-
not.
what I'm
That's
trying to
them
get
not
to-
doing their job.
What I'm trying to get to, we can't test that allegation. They're not here to answer that. So we take that at face value from you. But the question is, when this technology has been identified and quotes have come in and you're satisfied that it's a reasonable quote, will you ultimately be paying for that technology, or will you ask them to pay for it? Because it seems
At the moment, I imagine it will be a bit of both.
because
to be honest with you.
seems a bit academic for you to ask them to jump through hoops if you're not even going to pay for the spec.
Who's asking who to jump through hoops? Are they asking me to jump through a hoop, or am I asking them to jump through a hoop? I'm asking them for normal due diligence and governance of a project.
But that's
all I'm asking of them.
that's
They're
presumably-
asking for £2.5 million of spend without any governance on that spend. That's a hoop. I'm not asking them to jump through hoops. They are asking me to.
So the question I'm trying to ask is that, is it something that you're going to pay for?
I don't know.
'Cause
I will support and pay for the
why
bits.
would you ask them to provide evidence for something that you're not liable to pay for?
No, it's not about who is liable to pay for. I don't understand what you're saying.
It
They
is.
have not even provided us with enough evidence to know what to pay for, okay, and how much, which is the best way of paying for this. They have not provided that. So once they have provided that, we can then sit down and say, okay, well, I think we can pay for this bit as a government. That makes sense. We'll pay for that bit. But these bits you need to work towards as your business. You will earn profit and you take a grant from government. You can use some of that to fund some of it yourself. So either way, to be honest with you, government's providing them with a grant, or government's possibly providing them with a capital injection.
But there
Government will
isn't
be
a
paying
spare-
for a lot of
yeah,
it.
There isn't a spare £2.5 million sitting there waiting to be allocated. So the very basics are, this is the work, this is the minimum viable proposition, this is the cost that will be, and this is the business case. Because again, you know, if this is spending or it's investing to create a better product, then we're expecting to see a better return in terms of full house signs going up at the Opera House. So we want to see what the payback of that investment is.
So what I want to get to, Minister, and I think this is, I don't want to dwell on this all day, we spent quite a lot of time on it, but the Chief Minister said on the 21st of January, it has been identified that improvements can be made to technology, and I am absolutely sure, having spoken to the Minister, that government will assist where possible. Is that statement correct?
Yes, because we will assist where possible. I support it, but assist is not necessarily pay for.
Good.
Assist
Well,
is assist.
Can we ask for an update on that? Can we speak about the progress of that by the time we have our next meeting?
Oh, I'm sure we'll have some progress by the time we have our next meeting.
Any questions from colleagues?
It was just the one thing around, in terms of the proposal that you got around the cost of the upgrade that they were seeking. What conversations you had? Did you just dismiss it out of hand, or did you actually say there are some things that we can assist with, or there are some things that we can't?
Before you quickly go on that, when it was brought to my attention, I can't tell you the date, but it was mid-project, probably around March or April, as you say. When it was brought to my attention, I absolutely asked for the information. I said, so, you know, can we get a second opinion? Can we find out how much of this is necessary? Are alternative technologies available? Can we use alternative technologies or not? Particularly because cabling is quite destructive. So are there ways around that, such as wireless technologies, etc.? What was brought back to me so I did not dismiss anything out of hand. I asked, you know, can we understand this better? And what was brought back to me via officers was an absolute refusal on the part of the Opera House to do that to gather that information. That was what was reported to me.
So there were two items on the table of requests from the Opera House. One was a flexible floor, which you'll remember was spoken about. That was a £70,000 to £100,000 cost, which actually, when we worked it through, was more like a £350,000 to £400,000 cost, and that's why that was discounted from the project. Similarly, with the technical equipment and cabling, that price never stabilised. So other than the 2-week period where we took contractors off site and said, go and sort your stuff out, we expect, this is fundamentally procurement, okay? Whether it's done by government officers or done by the Opera House, there's a process you go through. And you have to adhere to simple principles like getting 3 quotes. And what we had was one quote that was never stable. It was doubling every week as people were going, oh, yes, sorry, that's caveated. That's no longer 60,000, it's 120,000. That's making it a little bit more difficult. And so that price went up, as I explained to you earlier. So simple principles of project management applied all the way through. We were good listeners. We put a lot into the Opera House that wasn't in the original spec. And I think it's frankly, you know, as the person who led the project, is disingenuous and difficult to deal with criticism when you've done things like stop the project in its tracks and take contractors offside to be able to accommodate requests. And that simple procurement, like show us 3 quotes, give us an options paper. An options paper says we can go from do nothing to do something 6-star. We don't need 6-star, perhaps in our Opera House in Jersey, maybe we need something 4.5-star or 5-star would be really nice. So we applaud ambition, and a lot of the things we accommodated in the project were in that vein. They were things that would make the building run better or smoother for the operator and what have you. This was, you know, brought to the table in a manner that it wasn't, you know, just what we weren't able to ever get to a point where it could be considered seriously.
So just to be clear then, to finish this, that what we have from you this afternoon is a willingness to actually get to a point where there is an agreement between the Opera House company and government as to what will be funded and what won't be funded.
There's a principle which is we wish to see the building open. We've audited the existing equipment in the building and been told by technical experts that that equipment is good to go and fit for purpose. It's not the latest, it's not the greatest, and it's not future-proof. But here and now, it's capable of delivering 6 out of 10 performances, let's say. And we want to see, after 4 years of closure, the building open and value added back to Jersey people through performances in the Opera House. And then there's a twin track approach, Deputy, after that, which is the Opera House, which the Minister's budgets have funded for the last 4 years, needs to be fundraising in parallel with running a venue to enable that technical equipment to come on stream in the next year or two. If it happens quickly, they're fundraising, and there are people out there who want to support that fundraising, it might happen very quickly. But, you know, I don't wish to speak on behalf of the Chief Minister, but I think what he was saying was we want to see the venue open, and we think in the background fundraising can continue, you know, and my minister is saying, and actually we've supported a team of people at that venue for the last 4 years who could have also been doing that fundraising rather than leaving it to the end of December 24 to start that process. So, you know, this is not something I think that the project board should shoulder any responsibility for. We did everything we could to be open-minded to.
Fundamentally, this was brought in on time, marginally under budget, and it's inexcusable that the Opera House board doesn't have a programme of what can be delivered and open and being delivered now, and in parallel to have been delivering a fundraising campaign for this and the quotes so that a proper business case could have been considered as to where the missing 1/3 of events or whatever it might be could be delivered if there was extra investment in technology over time.
And are you assured that you're going to get the return on the investment that you're seeking, given
we have to see what the cost is. So this is all about what can be done, as opposed to the focus is the wrong way around. The focus is what can't be done. There's always going to be something missing in facilities, premises, technology, whatever it might be. As I think he said, we applaud the ambition, but we can't be all things to all people. So let's focus on what we can do with what we've got. £13 million has gone into making this a future-proof building. It's been brought in on time by the project team. It's unforgivable that it's not open delivering what it can in the current environment, whilst in parallel, running commercially and seeking philanthropic donations that can maybe be a bridge to public funding, more taxpayer funding going into additional technology that can be added at a later stage that might provide the elusive 20%, 30% of events that they believe could be attracted but can't be staged at the moment.
Can I ask about the under budget? Because I seem to recall there was a figure of 11.5 million originally, and then didn't you come back to the States? Someone came back to the States to ask for more money. Is that not right? Am I making that up?
I don't remember coming.
It was 11.7, I believe, and then at the end of 23, the minister added an additional £1 million to the budget.
Can't really say it's on budget, under budget then, can you, if you've come back to the States for us to
that was
ask for
before
more
the
money?
project started.
Yeah.
So when it finished, it was within that envelope. Could I just say, and I appreciate that you've seen the frustration I have. It's been visible on my face, and I understand that. But I am incredibly frustrated. I do not mind being criticised. I do not mind being criticised as a minister for getting things wrong. But I know in this case we have not got things wrong. And I know that on the other side, the Opera House, from the way I see it, has not delivered what it should have been delivering as a company over the last 3 years, 4 years. They have been funded by the taxpayer. And information that I have asked for has not been delivered to me. And I find it incredibly frustrating to then be hauled through the media because of other people's failures to deliver what they need to deliver to enable me to help them. And I do think something needs to change in Jersey. And that is, number one, organisations, third-party organisations that receive government money need to operate within the budgets they've got. They cannot just overspend and then expect government to pick up the debt that they've incurred. We also need to see that organisations, where they are entrusted with government funding and £12 million of capital investment, that they operate in an enterprising fashion and they operate in very cooperative and very, like I say, enterprising, entrepreneurial is the word I'm looking for. That's what we need in Jersey. Just going to the media, complaining, and then expecting government to just say, oh yes, have your millions of pounds that you're asking for. That is not appropriate. I think it's deeply dangerous for the island.
There's something
and I think that it's, I will just finish, sorry. I think it's deeply dangerous for the island. And I think it's something that my department, more than any other department, funds third-party organisations. And we need those third-party organisations to be acting in a very professional manner within their budgets and doing their side of the bargain. It cannot be that this island keeps turning to government and saying government must, government must, government must. People complain about big government. Well, if you keep saying government must, then government will get bigger.
Minister, something we need to get to the bottom of. It's only because you've insisted on prolonging the discussion. On the one hand, we've heard that it talked about fundraising. So you're saying the Opera House need to raise their own funds to pay for this new spec?
So some of that funding, yeah.
So why would they be raising money? Why would you be asking them to provide estimates for something that they have to pay for?
At the time, they were asking us to pay for it. So their request was, can we have £2.5 million, was it? To do this work.
What we need to get
and
to the bottom of
do we have more than one quote? The answer was no.
What we need to get to the bottom of is that this is specialist equipment. It wouldn't usually be the case that they would pay for this out of their revenue grant.
Why would it not be?
Says who?
Which bit of the equipment? You're talking very generally. So which bit of the equipment are you talking about?
So what I'm trying to get to is that on the one hand, you've just said that they need to provide, they should be fundraising for this themselves to pay for this new equipment.
At least some of it.
Some of it. So
well, I said earlier that government may well be paying for some, they may well be paying some. I'm open to all solutions on this. I'm a very open-minded person. But they came to us with a request, mid-project, for millions of pounds on one quote.
This is what we need to get to the bottom of. Are you responsible for paying for that equipment or not?
Genuinely?
If you have a scope for a project, no. Within the scope.
Within the scope of that project, absolutely not. whether going forward, for
Because
other
I'm sure
parts, we are
in the
right.
past, when the Arts Centre have needed new equipment or replacement, they would usually put a capital bid in or a revenue bid. It would usually be for a capital project or a replacement, and that would go to government, and they'd say yes or no once they'd received the due governance.
That's exactly what hasn't been
But
received from the
what we
Opera
haven't established here is that there's a dissonance between whether the Opera House need to pay for this new equipment or whether government needs to pay for it. And until that's been accepted,
The dissonance is understanding what equipment.
but it
Because
doesn't matter what
It does
equipment.
matter what equipment. It
Why?
absolutely matters
Okay,
what equipment.
could you explain that?
Well, yeah. If, let's say it's a light, okay? There's a light, a stage
You know
light.
it's not a light though.
Well, part of it is a light. One of the things they've asked for is a control board. I forget what the actual technical term is for it. A control board. Actually, you can argue either way whether we should pay for it or they should pay for it. I actually believe they should pay for it because it's part of the movable equipment in the Opera House. We, as we have said, are providing a watertight building. We are the landlord. We do not.
Property
When
holdings
you're a
are-
landlord,
property
you
holdings are the
do not
landlord.
pay for the TV screen on the wall. The tenant pays for the TV.
Property holdings are the landlord, aren't they?
The government is the landlord.
But it's property holdings, it's not your department.
No, government is landlord
But you
through
are the
property
But
holdings.
you are the culture minister,
Yep.
and so you are responsible for providing a grant that's sufficient for them to run
Yeah,
and put shows on,
and we have done that for 4 years where they've put on.
but
very
not all
few
shows. Just 6 out of 10 shows potentially.
I don't know what you're saying.
Well, that's
Well,
what we-
they're
that's
not
what
even
we've just
staging
said.
6 out of 10 shows, and I think that's where we should be focusing our efforts. Why are they not staging 6 out of 10? Because they're trying to hold everyone hostage for more taxpayers' money to do the extra 4 out of 10.
Okay.
So I think that's where the crux of the issue is, and it's a matter of confidence in the Opera House board
So we-
to come good with the right quotes that can be properly
We may need to
considered.
put this to the opera. I mean, it may well be that we need to do a further piece of scrutiny on this. I think saying that they're
entirely
holding
up to you.
taxpayers to hostage is
It's entirely up to
quite
you.
a strong statement. But
Say that again?
saying that they're holding taxpayers to hostage
said
is
that?
quite.
I just said that because that's what it is. The Opera House could be open, staging productions today.
Yeah.
The fact that it's not is a failing of the Jersey Opera House board, because they are wanting to say we need these extra things before we can open.
So do
Instead
you
of
have
focusing on what
confidence
we
in the
can-
board, Minister, in the Opera House board? You've said a lot of disparaging things about them. Do you have confidence in the board of the Opera House?
I'm yet to be satisfied to the extent that I can answer that question in the positive.
Okay. Should we move on? This is quite an interesting topic, but I think we've got other areas to cover. We're likely not to get.
Could I just say, Jersey's done an amazing thing with the Opera House, and actually the way this whole questioning goes shows how we can amazingly snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. The fact that we're saying, oh, should it be you paying it, and we're getting so caught up on something like that, when actually what we've got is an amazing Opera House, an amazing project that's been done, and that we should be celebrating that, but instead we get caught up in genuinely a tit for tat. And I just think it's unbelievable sign of the obstacles this island is going to have to overcome if that's how we approach things, where we do really, really well. We deliver something really well, and actually what we get focused on is the criticism, not the celebration. The island needs to learn to celebrate what we do well a lot better.
I think it's an argument about form and function, isn't it? I mean, the form of the Opera House is superb in terms of its refurbishment. The question is whether it can function in the way that it could.
Well, the Opera House,
Can we move-
any facility can be better.
Minister, can we move
any
on?
facility
I
can be
think this
better.
is
This
why-
facility can be better.
Yeah.
The brand new government building can be better.
Yeah, I think this
You know,
is why
that's
we're trying
always
to
the
find
case.
out what the
Minister,
barriers to
I
that.
do want to draw a line under the Opera House for now. We may need to come back to it in one form or another. But I know you've got some other staff here that we want to hear from. And so can we turn on to the legislation that's coming forward about shipping, if that's okay. So I think it's question 4, and I'll pass over to Deputy Wilson. If that's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry to keep you waiting.
The panel has noted the lodging of P3 2024 and P4 2024. It last posed this question on these issues in April last year. Can you just outline why it's taken so long to get us to this point?
The scope of work to amend both the Shipping Law 2002 and the Inshore Harbour Safety Regs has been ongoing for some time, previous to the current government. when we had the completed propositions on which we consulted in summer 2022 and approached lodging, it was felt on the advice by the Law Drafting Office that the propositions could be optimised just in terms of the way that language was expressed and so on. And so that the scope of work that has gone on has been to reshape and optimise the propositions, get them into the best shape possible before bringing them before the Assembly.
And it's taken that length of time to do it. Have there been significant changes to it?
No, not to in terms of its legal effect, but it is a complex area of primary law, the shipping law especially. So as we've gone through it, there have been tweaks and changes that need to have been made on the advice of law officers.
Thank you. In terms of any changes that have been made to the draft legislation, can you tell us if there has been any over this time and what they are?
Not again, Deputy, not to the legal effect. I think if we were to reflect on the development of these two propositions, and we do acknowledge it, has taken some time, that would have been a consultation phase. So how we consulted was to obviously promote a consultation publicly and invite views. It's also fair to say this will have implications for the yachting and boating community. So we made sure that each of Jersey's boat owners associations and yachts clubs were written to directly and offered an in-person meeting with officers. But in terms of what we actually uncovered through the consultation process was that there was support from the public for the proposed changes to law, which is change the definition of vessel under shipping law, and also the introduction of new criminal offences in the inshore safety regulations.
Thank you.
I think it's also fair to say there's been a number of background incidents that the law does help to address in other ways, but those have been working their way through different either court cases or other procedural inquiries. That as they've concluded, that also is quite instructive to how the law's developed.
Sure. Okay, thank you. The amended law will also update articles relating to inquiries into marine incidents. Can you just talk us through these, please?
So it includes, bringing up to date the provisions for the investigation of marine accidents involving Jersey ships or ships in Jersey waters. I would definitely ask Thomas to be more specific on that.
Yes, so at the moment, the Minister will, if there is a serious marine incident, the Minister issues a ministerial decision to instruct that a marine accident or marine safety investigation should take place. The proposition proposes that this process should be eased so harbours authorities can begin that process more efficiently.
It also helps us clarify responsibilities with regard to police and harbour authorities. I think it's really important, and certain incidents in the past have helped us understand that there was a lack of clarity in those areas, and so this will help us create that clarity so we know when the police are involved, when the harbour authorities are able to satisfy themselves with regard to something, an investigation, etc., themselves.
Sure, so it doesn't jeopardise some of those proceedings, is that what? Okay.
I would just also add, Deputy, that only this week we, through a ministerial decision, Ports of Jersey Limited have published an enforcement policy which sets out their approach to both the policing of potential incidents and potential offences, but also its roles and responsibilities in the safety of Jersey's inshore harbours publicly.
Thank you. So can you confirm, will there still be a publication of a report from the Minister as a result of those changes at all in relation to those proceedings?
That's on Jersey registered vessels, I think.
Yeah.
That's when
I mean, the ultimate report from a maritime incident.
From a maritime incident? Yes.
Yeah, it's customary for those to be published at the conclusion of investigations in any prosecution that's run in parallel with those investigations.
Right, so you will wait for all of those proceedings to be completed before you publish the report?
But I think this depends on whether it's a Jersey registered vessel or not.
Okay.
So, for instance, there was, a couple of years ago, an awful incident that resulted in loss of life. The vessels involved in that were not Jersey registered vessels. So the marine investigation reports don't come from Jersey, they come from the jurisdictions where those vessels are registered. I believe that's correct, isn't it, Thomas? So the reports that the minister here kind of issues will be with regard to Jersey registered vessels. So, for instance, I know that I've had to issue reports via ports of Jersey on incidents in Croatia, in Greece, places like this, because they're Jersey registered vessels. The one particularly awful incident in Jersey, neither vessel was Jersey registered. One of the vessels was Jersey registered, the fishing vessel, but the main vessel was flagged under the Bahamas, so the investigation was carried out by the Bahamas and the UK authorities. They would then issue that report, not the minister in Jersey.
Okay. Can you confirm how expenses of an inquiry are currently covered, and are there going to be any changes proposed under the amendments to the law?
I don't believe there are any changes about the costs, etc.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask, there's something which I need to get straight in my head, maybe you can help me with that. So it regards the changes that are being made about alcohol consumption or drug usage, but
This is the harbour's inshore safety.
yeah, the P3.
P3.
Yeah,
rather
P3.
than P4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Is that all right to talk about that?
Yeah,
at this
yeah,
point?
absolutely. I'm just aware that most of my previous answers are about P4.
P4.
Yeah, no, that's fine. This is
Yeah.
a different, we've kind of had them together.
That was
our
fine.
questioning. So am I right in thinking that alcohol consumption in itself and being over the limits that are prescribed in there are in itself not an offence? So you can, for want of a better expression, get behind the wheel of a boat and you can be over the limit for driving, for example, and that's okay legally, so long as you don't commit a subsequent offence.
So there won't be, under the proposal, there is no offence to introduce there's no proposal to introduce a new offence of being drunk in charge of a vessel in the same way that there is, for example, an offence to be drunk in charge of a motor vehicle.
But it is currently not, you are not allowed to be, currently it is against the law to be under the influence of drugs, etc., alcohol, whilst in charge of a vessel. The problem we've had and we've identified is that there's no way of obliging testing for that.
What law is it that makes that an offence?
That would be, I believe,
There's harbour's insurance, but by there is the new offence would include being in dangerous operation of a ship.
So I get that. But so just to clarify, if you're over the limit, so if you drink 2 bottles of wine and get on and pilot a ship or
today
boat,
you're talking about.
today,
Yeah.
but even with this new law, is that a de facto offence?
You could be in dangerous operation of a vessel.
But that requires another action, doesn't it? So if you've consumed 2 or 3 bottles of wine, but you're driving perfectly safely, is that an offence?
We'll double check with law officers and come back to the panel. But as I said, in my inexpert legal view, I think that would amount to being in dangerous operation of a ship. But what we're saying here is that the inclusion of drug and alcohol offences are the aggravating offences around the core new offences of causing death or serious injury by careless operation of a ship.
So I think this is likely to be a sticking point in the debate, because I think you can understand in a car, it's quite clear. You don't need to be driving dangerously. You just need to be over the limit, and then that's an offence in itself. So I could report somebody who I think's had 3 pints of beer,
I see what you mean. Yeah.
and they'll be stopped because there's reasonable.
I think I've discussed this in Scrutiny previously.
Yeah, we have.
Possibly, I can't remember if it's this panel or the previous panel, but
So I think because we're getting closer to the lodging, I think it's important for us to understand that this isn't just a policing issue, but it's the fact that the alcohol is an aggravating factor, but it's not a sufficient factor for an offence to have been committed.
So if you're sitting on your vessel, but you're in charge of your vessel and you've consumed 3 bottles of wine, in itself, I don't think today that's an offence.
Yeah.
These new laws equally don't make that an offence, but what they do make an offence is, basically, if you do that and you then have some sort of collision, some sort of incident, you can now, these laws then make it possible to be tested for that alcohol.
But do you think that's the right balance, though?
And this is what I responded last time. I do think it's the right balance. We could have gone down the road of a kind of road safety measure where we say, I don't know what the limit is in terms of micrograms, but however many micrograms per litre of blood, and say if you've got this much in your blood, you are committing an offence. We could have gone down that road. I believe that was too big a leap from where we are today.
But that's-
Given that there are not many incidents, this isn't something which is, we do not see many incidents on the sea where this happens. And so to say, right, we're going all the way to a kind of drunken sailing offence, I think was wrong. So in a sense, it's a halfway house. It's a first step towards that. And what it's saying is, if you have an incident, you can now be tested for alcohol or drugs. And should that be a positive test, then that will be you, an aggravating factor in dangerous operation of ships. So it's what you can't do now is previously you could have an incident and you could refuse to be tested. And there was nothing that could be done about that.
I guess
we've opened that door.
I guess the question is partly about a political one, about how comfortable you are and government are of sending a message out that it's okay to be drunk in charge of a
I think it's a very
vessel.
cynical way of
No, it's
viewing
factual.
the message.
It's the
I don't
message.
think it is factual. I think it's...
The legal position is that you can be drunk in charge of a vessel so long as it doesn't impinge on your capability.
That's been the legal position for my lifetime and beyond.
Yeah, but it's-
so, I don't think I'm the first minister to actually grab this and say we need to do something about it.
And it's
So
the
I'd
reason
say
that,
that's a
it's
really
the
good
reason that
step
you
in
don't want to
itself.
upset the boating community.
There's
It'd be too much of a
a
cultural
reason
shift.
I want to make sure that people, you take people along with you. And I do think that, if your concern with scrutiny is we should have gone to that whole level straight away, then that's fine. What I'd say is well, don't stop this legislation, because all you'll be doing is delaying the ability for that to happen. By bringing in this legislation, you're going one step down that road. If, as a scrutiny panel, you think it should then be further enhanced and to go all the way to a kind of 100 micrograms per litre or whatever the number
but
is,
the-
you can, let's do that as a second stage.
So this is
Let's
the point
not
that
hold this up for that.
You talked about the micrograms, but the micrograms are,
A bit like the Opera House. You aim for, if you're always trying to get just purely perfect, you never achieve anything.
in terms of the micrograms, it is the same limits for driving, isn't it? Is that correct? Can you confirm that? You're using exactly the same limits as you would be for driving in terms of the, for the offences, is that correct?
In my understanding of the blood alcohol content level, yeah.
Yeah, so there's exact parity between how much alcohol you've got in your system for driving and for sailing.
Yeah,
Do you accept that?
I'm happy to.
Yeah, so we're not suggesting a different limit. I don't think. It's just that there's something that doesn't sit right with me philosophically, that you can drink as much as you like, get behind the wheel of a boat, and that's okay so long as you're capable of steering that vessel. But you can't do that in a car. You can't say, look, I've got a really strong constitution, so I'm used to drinking 4 pints a day and drive, and you still get put in prison, probably.
I think there's, so philosophically, I think there's a fundamental difference between the amount of traffic on the roads, the amount of people, the amount of children, the amount of pedestrians, the amount of cyclists, the amount of horses, the amount of tractors, the amount of buses, etc. on the roads, compared to the amount of traffic on the seas. And I think that is fundamentally where the difference is.
Even though we have had an incident recently with a big ferry and some fishermen, we don't know if that was an aggravating factor.
I'm sorry.
I think when these things
it's
happen,
utterly inappropriate to talk about that, which is sub judice, in terms of aggravating factors, because we have no idea.
I think the point is that when these incidents happen, they might not be as often, but they still have deadly consequences. I think that's the issue, isn't it?
It's, from your perspective, it appears to be.
Is that not an issue? That alcohol and... What's your message that you want to give out to people about alcohol and sailing?
Well, I do want to give the message that people should not be inebriated whilst they're sailing, and that they can now be tested for that, whereas previously they couldn't be tested for that.
So
and
why
I think
doesn't
that
why
in
doesn't
itself
the, why
would
doesn't
give
the
the
law
message
say,
that they
so
should
why
be
doesn't the
tested.
law say that explicitly, that you can't be inebriated and sail? Why is that not an offence?
Well, I think the law does say it, it just hasn't made it an offence to be sat on your boat with alcohol.
So, yeah. Do you not understand you've contradicted yourself?
No, I haven't contradicted myself.
Well, we'll let the Hansards, the transcript, record that. Okay, any other questions? No. Good. I think we'll wrap this up. Thank you. We've got to 3 o'clock. Minister, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Officers, thank you for coming. There'll be areas that we might need to follow up on with letters, or possibly